It's the Sustainable Ministry Show. This is episode number 9. It may be a little scandalous. Hey folks, we're back. It's the Sustainable Ministry Show again with Andrew Zersky and Melissa Rao and Stephen Ingram. Yeah, so I'm Bryant and serving at a church in Charlotte. My big blunder in communications when texting first started taking off in youth ministry, I was using an ad-based service. It was free, unlimited number of users, but ad-based. And the mistake came when we began doing our sexuality series. And I started putting reminders in the text messages about like, don't forget our sex and dating talk starts this week. Sent that out. And it's ad based, right? So it was taking ads based on the language and the words that were in the text message. And so it was a Wednesday night, high school group was coming in, text went out, don't forget sex and dating starts tonight. And it took about 3 minutes, I think, before the first parent called that had gotten the text message and had a Plan B ad in the text based on the words sex and dating. And so up until program started, I was filtering calls. And then, of course, when the kids came in, they're like, what was that text about? We're doing Plan B. What's this? All the kids joking around about it the entire time.
I think there are definitely a lot of youth ministries, but ministries generally that think, hey, if we send out that church newsletter, if the pastor even writes a little article about what's happening in the life of the church, somehow we've created this sense of community and invited people to really feel connected to not only the church, but be connected to one another. And I think we've got to make a hard separation between letting people know about our events and truly caring for them, being involved in their lives, being aware of what's happening. I think there needs to be a lot more social in the social media that we use. The church, I think, has done a really good job in a very bad way of taking the social out of social media.
I think we have to reclaim the art of storytelling, but I think we have to do that in new and innovative ways. I think we've got to learn to tell stories across platforms. If you talk to most people who work in churches now, they'll tell you that the primary place to tell stories is from the pulpit. And I would just argue that's not the case, especially when the average churchgoer goes once every 4 weeks or once a month. So that's not going to be your primary place. Plus, the pulpit interaction, I think only 18% of people, that's their primary way of understanding and learning. And so I think we've got to be really versatile with how we tell these stories. I think we've got to tell them through video. I think we've got to tell them through pictures, through social media, and really just across platforms. So people are going to buy into vision, and people are going to be better served if they're able to hear the story in the way that is most receptive to them. And so I think we've got to become better storytellers, which truthfully I think takes us back to the earliest days of our faith when that's all we had were stories. So.
Well, I love what you're saying there, Stephen, because even when people sign up for things or don't sign up for things, it's usually because they're connected to some other story about that event or that thing that's going on in the church, that mission project, what have you. And I think it's a question that we ask when we say, well, we put this out there, we communicated it, nobody signed up. What story has been told about that? Because people want to connect with stories. They don't want to connect with details. They want to connect with those life-changing events that other people have had. And that's why they sign up for things. It's just so important to make sure that that's shared.
I kind of feel like we're talking about two different things, though. Thanks to what Andrew had said earlier, I'm wondering if perhaps we can build story into both communications and marketing. So if we have a goal in mind, we want people to come, or we have an event we're promoting, that would fall into the marketing category. Is that correct?
That's where I'd put it, definitely.
Yeah. So, but how can we better communicate stories so people of our churches can live into that story and feel like they're a part of that story not necessarily have a goal in mind for them to come, but how can we better tell that story in a communicating way and less of a marketing way?
I think one thing is to keep the message simple. I'm reminded of a church that I've worked with this year, um, that was complaining about people weren't reading the emails, but what they were doing was putting their newsletter together and then making a PDF and then attaching that to an email and sending it out. So um, if people did open the email, they still had another thing. It just copy and paste all that content and put it right in the email, just making it a little simpler for folks to get the message that you're telling, to keep it less complicated, to get to the content.
Yeah, when I talk to churches, and because I think we all hear the same thing over and over again, people are not reading our emails, right? And so one of the things I tell churches is New York Times figured this out a few years ago. They when they want to promote stories, when they want you to either come to their website to start subscribing to their paper, whether it's physical or online, what they do, all of their emails really are based on the 140 character rule. They might have 6 stories they're wanting to communicate or bring you to their website through. And so what they'll do is they'll give you about 140 character, about a tweet, description of what the actual story is. And then it'll say, if you'd like to learn more, or if you'd like to follow this further, click here to read more, right? And so what it's doing is it's pulling them. So it's giving you a snippet and then pulling them. And so what I've been advising churches to do is when you communicate, give the snippets of what you're trying to communicate, and then say, to read more, click here. And then it hyperlinks back to the website. And so I just keep telling churches, follow the 140 character New York Times model if you're wanting to communicate logistics. And it will pull them back to your site. And then when they go to your site, that's where you have the full information. That's where you have all the major details, what, who, what, when, why, where, and how. And I would encourage you to also have a video snippet of what's going to happen at that event. Tell the story through that as well.
I was just going to say the whole thing between communications and marketing that Andrew was talked about at the very beginning just kind of intrigued me a little bit because I think he's spot on. I think too many times we're confusing marketing and communications. Mm-hmm. Communications is really what fuels communion, right?
I think students are still asking, adults are still asking, even the question of who's going to be there. And so I think you're right, Stephen, to say the stories matter, but people want to be connected to one another, not to an event. I don't think people feel necessarily as allegiant to an organization as they used to, and so I think trying to utilize more one-on-one communication with one another makes a whole lot of sense. And I don't mean, hey, let's stop sending out church newsletters or church marketing, but once we've done that, let's talk about, okay, do we just want people to come to our events, or is there another aspect to the way that we can use social media, which is actually to connect individually and pastorally with our congregants, and to connect them to one another. There are so many ways in which pastoral care, both of adolescents and adults, has fallen by the wayside that actually social media is a great way to reinvigorate some of that personal one-on-one caring, or even to start it there and bleed it over into face-to-face settings. And so one of the things that I've tried that I think is really helpful is to send out personal invites to an event, whether that's a text message or a Facebook message or an Instagram direct message even. And it takes a little bit more time to do those personalized invitations. But if you're in a large church, then getting numerous people to do that with you, sending out 5 to 10 each, it takes less than 30 seconds to do that, can be a really meaningful way, not just to get the promotion out there, but also to actually begin connecting with that person on what's actually going on in their week and throughout their life. And I get amazing responses back when I do that. What I found is I was using a group messaging feature for a while that would send text messages out to students about that evening's youth group, but it would do it individually. It wouldn't go as a group message. And it was about 3 weeks into using that, just giving, hey, tonight is this and this, and hope to see you there. I started getting students that responded back thinking that I was actually typing that message directly to them. And they would be, hey, I've got this going on, or I've got that going on, or I'm excited about tonight. And that actually gave me pause, realizing that they really wanted some personal communication. There's something meaningful about that, and they would talk to me about a whole lot more than just the event if I did that.
Okay, so similar but different fame, and maybe a little scandalous. There's a school of thought that adults shouldn't necessarily be friend requesting or being friends with kids on Facebook. So I'm just wondering what your line of thought is, and if we could just talk about that just a teeny bit.
Yeah. It's controversial, definitely. Here's my line of thought on it, and I'll just put it out there. I think it's ludicrous to think that adults shouldn't be communicating with students via social media. Yes. We didn't put that kind of restriction on a telephone. We would never tell an adult that they can't pick up the telephone and make a phone call. While social media allows for a variety of different kinds of contact, I think it's just ludicrous to think that we should keep students separated that way from adults. I think there are some great protections that can be put in place, but I have no problem with adult volunteers in the ministry friending students and being and connected to them via social networks. Again, I think there have to be some smart safeguards in place to both protect students and protect adults. But I think it's fabulous if it's integrated well into the ministry.
I would add to that. I think parents and church leaders both have to understand exactly what you've been talking about, what you wrote about in your book, Andrew, about how important that social media communication is to teenagers, and how foundational of a role it plays in their sense of belonging, as well as in a sense of safety. I mean, the way you talk about it in your book, that cell phone is a lifeline out to people when they're feeling unsafe or when they're feeling alone or depressed or whatever, right? So it's a lifeline out. And if the other end of that lifeline is an adult, that's a beautiful thing, right? And so I think educating church leaders and educating parents that this isn't just a frivolous way that we're marketing to your kids. This isn't some kind of predatory trap that your kids could fall into. But this really is another way, as you said, Andrew, another way that we're going to pastorally care for your kids and how important it is, and show the research, which I think your book does really well. The second thing I would say, and I've heard this at a few churches, and it blows my mind when I do. I'll have a youth minister or a parent or a pastor say, well, yeah, that's all great and good, except for there's this one guy who, I don't know, we're just a little afraid he might take it too far. If you've got a guy who you think might take it too far, he doesn't need to be volunteering with your kids.
I would definitely jump on that and be like, okay, yeah, the scenario I would give then is like, wait a second, if you've got somebody who's going to take it too far on Facebook,
that's right.
Are you protecting the phone numbers of students from this person as well? Is that what you would have done 20 years ago? Say, well, we got somebody who might, phone call kids and say inappropriate things, so we're not going to give out phone numbers. That wouldn't make sense, and I think you're dead on that be more aware of the kind of people you have volunteering with students. That's right. You're aware of or scared of.
Yeah, we always say to keep it public. So if you want to engage kids on social media, keep your account public, keep your communications public. And then beyond that, don't delete things, right? Just as a security measure, safety net. So if it's on Facebook, you keep the entire stream. If it's a text message, you keep the entire stream, whatever it is. And and I'm not necessarily against Snapchat, but that kind of writes that app out because it's created around privacy. And it's great for certain things and great for relationships, and kids love it. I'm all for that. But it's not a place where I think our volunteers necessarily can keep it public. And often things are deleted, and that's just as a safety net for them, a practice I've tried to help them kind of put in place is to keep it public and don't delete things.
Yeah, but also you can. Yeah, I think you're right about Snapchat in terms of of volunteer use. I think you have to be very careful that way. I don't have a problem with Snapchat, the way that students use it. I think it's been dragged through the mud in terms of popular media, and I don't think it's actually used the way that it's often presented.
Yeah.
But something else that can happen too, Bryant, is that you can actually set up a group account on Facebook, a group account, even a cell phone number, like a Google Voice number, and just ask your volunteers to always copy that account in when they're messaging students. And so you have the transcript then of student-adult interactions in kind of a third-party place, so that even if they do delete those messages, you've got a record of that. Because there are conversations that begin online that are private conversations, in the sense that students are confiding, maybe in an adult leader not initially going on in their life. And I don't think we have to put adult volunteers in a place to say, hey, we can't have those conversations online. As much as if we're going to have those conversations, then copy the account into the group account into that conversation, so that there's someone else who's aware of that.
I think our hypervigilance has turned into a little bit of paranoia that's literally crippled relationships in the Christian church. And so this is a really big conversation.
And certainly doesn't sum it all up by any means. There's a lot of questions that churches are asking about communication, and quite a few that still probably need to put some plans in place and share those with folks. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us about communications. You can reach me at bryant@ministryarchitects.com or on Facebook, facebook.com/Bryant Johnson. What about you guys? Where can folks keep up with you?
Yeah, they can reach me at ymprof.com or on Twitter at ymprof, also on Facebook.
You can reach me at melissa@ministryarchitects.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
I'd love to talk with you at organicstudentministry.com. I'm also on Facebook. You can go like my author page there, and we can share ideas over Twitter as well.